to Haunted. Tonight I'll show you what was never meant to be seen. Just remember, once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. I've worked as a forest ranger in Blackwood National Park for 15 years. The park spans thousands of acres of dense woodland, rugged mountains and endless hiking trails. Most visitors stick to the marked paths, take their pictures, and leave without incident. But sometimes people wander off trail. Sometimes they don't come back. That's when they call me. 3 years ago, a family of 4 went missing during a camping trip. Father, mother, 2 young children. Their car was number 17. No signs of struggle, no blood, just abandonment. After 2 days of standard search procedures yielding nothing, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Try the hollow," she said quietly. "If anyone asks, you're checking the eastern ridge." The hollow wasn't on any park maps. It was a depression between 2 mountains, perpetually shrouded in mist regardless of weather. Rangers spoke of it in hushed tones. Officially, it was restricted due to unstable terrain. Unofficially, we all knew better. I set out at dawn. The closer I got to the hollow, the quieter the forest became. No birdsong, no insect buzz, just silence and the crunch of my boots on fallen leaves. The temperature dropped suddenly as I descended into the mist. My radio emitted only static. The trees here grew oddly, trunks twisted, branches reaching downward instead of up toward the sky. In the center of the hollow stood a single massive oak tree. Ancient, its trunk wide enough that 5 people linking hands couldn't encircle it. At its base lay 4 backpacks, the missing family's gear. "Hello," I called, voice swallowed by the thick air. "Park ranger, is anyone here?" A child's laugh echoed from somewhere behind the great oak. I circled the tree slowly, hand on my sidearm. There was no one there. But carved into the bark, fresh enough that sap still oozed from the cuts, were 4 sets of initials, matching the missing family. That's when I noticed the whispering. It seemed to come from inside the tree itself. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of voices overlapping in sibilant conversation. I couldn't make out words, just the unmistakable cadence of human speech. Something compelled me to press my ear against the bark. "So happy here. Join us. Never hungry, never cold. Come inside." I recognized the voice of a young child, then a man, then countless others. Some speaking in languages I didn't understand, some in English so archaic it barely registered as such. A small handprint appeared in the bark beside my face, pressed outward, as if something inside was trying to reach through. I ran, scrambled up the slope, out of the hollow, not stopping until my radio crackled back to life with a colleague's voice asking for a status update. I reported finding no sign of the family. What else could I say? 2 weeks later, another ranger discovered 4 sets of clothes, neatly folded at the base of an ordinary-looking tree near campsite number 17. The missing persons case remains open. Since that day, I've 3 times, each under my fingernails, bark embedded in my palms. I restore old houses for a living. Historic properties with character, as realtors like to say. After years in the business, I've seen it all. Rot-eaten foundations, colonies of bats, even the occasional grave marker buried beneath floorboards. Old houses have secrets. It's part of their charm. But nothing prepared me for the Blackwell estate. Built in 1887 by railroad tycoon Edmund Blackwell, the mansion had stood abandoned for decades before a tech millionaire bought it for renovation. My company won the contract. The house was a disaster: water damage, structural issues, vandalism. But it was the basement that concerned me most. Unlike the ornate Victorian architecture above, the basement featured rough stone walls and a dirt floor, unusual for a house of that pedigree. During our initial assessment, my assistant Marcus noticed something odd about the basement's dimensions. "These measurements don't match the foundation," he said, comparing his laser readings to the blueprint. "There's a 15-foot discrepancy on the east wall." We tapped along the stone, listening for hollow spots. Near the northeast corner, the sound changed. Closer inspection revealed mortar of a slightly different color. Newer, perhaps 50 years old rather than 130. "Someone sealed up part of the basement," I concluded. "Let's open it up." We should have left it alone. Behind the wall was a narrow corridor leading to a circular chamber about 12 feet in diameter. The walls were lined with some kind of bronze metal, heavily tarnished. No windows, no other doors, just smooth metal walls and a concrete floor. Most unsettling was what hung from the ceiling, a crude chandelier made from what appeared to be human bones. Marcus thought it was a macabre joke left by previous visitors. I was, "Hey, listen to this weird echo." His voice reverberated strangely in the metal room. I joined him. "Hello," I said experimentally. My voice bounced back, distorted. "Hello, hello, hello." But there was something else beneath the echo. Another voice, whispering words I couldn't quite make out. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "Hear what?" I spoke louder. "Hello." The echo returned. "Hello, hello, hello." But now the whisper was clearer. "Help us." "There it is again." I grabbed Marcus's arm. "Someone said help us." He looked concerned. "I don't hear anything except our echoes." I tried once more. "Who are you?" The echo was immediate, but so was the response, now at conversational volume. "We are the witnesses, the sacrifices, the fuel." This time Marcus went pale. He'd heard it too. We backed toward the corridor as the echoes continued without further prompting. Dozens of voices now overlapping, some screaming, some whispering, all seeming to emanate from the metal walls themselves. "Edmund brings them here. One each month when the moon is dark. Our blood on the floor, our bones above, speaking to what waits beyond. So hungry." The chandelier began to sway, though there was no breeze. The bones clinked together like macabre wind chimes. We ran. At the basement stairs, I glanced back to see a dark liquid beginning to seep through the tarnished metal walls of the distant chamber. I notified the police, who investigated and found nothing unusual. No chamber, no corridor, just a solid stone wall. They suggested we'd discovered an old coal room and let our imaginations run wild. The project continued, but I refused to enter the basement again. 3 weeks later, Marcus disappeared. The same night, neighbors reported seeing lights in the basement windows of the still vacant house. I've since learned that every owner of the Blackwell estate throughout its history has disappeared under mysterious circumstances, all during new moon nights. The current owner is hosting a housewarming party next week. It falls, perhaps not coincidentally, on a moonless night. My invitation arrived yesterday, handwritten on heavy stationery. At the bottom, in different ink, "The chamber misses your voice. I'm leaving town tomorrow. Some echoes answered." I work IT support for Meridian Heights, an upscale retirement community. Most of my job involves helping residents connect printers or explaining how to video chat with grandchildren. Nothing exciting. Until Mrs. Eleanor Patterson in apartment 417 complained about her television. "It keeps changing to a channel that doesn't exist," she explained over the phone. "Just static and strange noises. I can't sleep with it turning on at all hours." I figured it was typical. Elderly resident accidentally hitting wrong buttons on the remote, or perhaps a power surge affecting the TV's memory settings. I promised to stop by that afternoon. Mrs. Patterson was a pleasant woman in her 80s, immaculately dressed, her apartment filled with antiques and family photographs. The television in question was a modern flat screen, barely 6 months old. "It happened again last night," she said, offering me tea. 3:17 in the morning, precisely. The TV turns itself on, switches to channel 13, and there's nothing but static. Sometimes I think I hear voices. I checked the TV's settings, finding nothing unusual. The cable package didn't even have a channel 13. It jumped from 12 to 14. "Perhaps it's just a power fluctuation," I suggested. "I'll leave this monitoring device overnight to record any electrical issues." That should have been the end of it. A simple explanation for an elderly woman's confusion. But at precisely 3:17 a.m. my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson, voice shaking. "It's happening now," she whispered. "But it's worse. Please come." Something in her voice convinced me this wasn't confusion or loneliness. I drove back to Meridian Heights, using my master key to enter the building. The hallway outside apartment 417 was unnaturally cold. From beneath the door came the flickering blue light of a television screen. Mrs. Patterson opened at my first knock, looking terrified. "It won't turn off," she said. "And look, it's showing my Howard." In the living room, the TV displayed what appeared to be surveillance footage of a hospital room. An elderly man lay in the bed, connected to various monitors. "That's my husband," Mrs. Patterson explained. "He passed 3 years ago. That's exactly how he looked in hospice." Indeed, the monitoring device I'd left showed no electrical anomalies, but confirmed the TV had activated itself at exactly 3:17 a.m. "Has this happened before?" I asked, seeing specific images in the static. She nodded slowly. "Last week it showed my childhood home. The week before, my sister who died in 1995. Her voice dropped. "It's working backward through my life." I tried turning off the TV. The power button did nothing. Mrs. Patterson in her 40s arguing with a teenage girl. The girl stormed out, slamming a door. Mrs. Patterson collapsed in tears. "Their last conversation," came a voice. Not from Mrs. Patterson beside me, but from the TV itself. The real Mrs. Patterson gripped my arm. "We have to leave," she said, to the part I can't bear to see again. As we moved toward the door, the TV screen filled with static, then showed a new image. A young Mrs. Patterson holding something wrapped in a blood-stained blanket, terror on her face. She looked directly at the camera, mouth forming the words, "No one can know." I hurried Mrs. Patterson into the hallway. Through the closing door, I glimpsed the screen changing again, showing my face, staring at the TV from a perspective behind me that couldn't possibly exist. Mrs. Patterson moved out the next day. The new resident reported no issues with the television, but sometimes, in my own apartment, my TV turns itself on at 3:17 a.m. So far it's just static. But I've started seeing shapes in the snow, and last night I swear I heard my name. I've applied for jobs in different cities. Until then, I unplug my TV before sleeping. Some channels aren't meant to be viewed. I've been driving for a rideshare company for 3 years now. Late nights are the most profitable. Drunken partygoers, airport arrivals, people too tired to drive themselves home from graveyard shifts. You see humanity at its most unguarded, but there's one passenger I can't forget. The one who wasn't there. It started on a Tuesday just after midnight. A pickup request came through from an address in the old part of town. Those Victorian houses now divided into apartments, mostly occupied by college students and young professionals. The request was under the name Mary. Estimated ride time 17 minutes. Destination Lakeview Cemetery. Odd, but not alarming. Maybe someone visiting a loved one's grave. Maybe a goth kid on a dare. Either way, their money spent just as well. I pulled up to the address, a dilapidated 3-story house with peeling paint and sagging porch steps. The app pinged that my passenger had been notified of my arrival. 5 minutes passed. No Mary. I was about to cancel when my car's back door opened. The seat compressed as if someone sat down, but I saw no one. I turned, heart suddenly racing. Hello? No response. The seatbelt clicked into place on its own. My first thought was some kind of mechanical failure, seat pressure sensors malfunctioning maybe. But then the app chimed. Mary has updated the destination. The new destination was 1123 Willow Street, an address across town, nowhere near the cemetery. Is someone there? I asked, voice embarrassingly high. The temperature in the car plummeted. My breath clouded in front of my face, despite the summer night outside. Mail barely above a whisper came to drive. He'll know I'm gone soon. I nearly jumped out of the car, but something in that voice, the raw fear, the desperation, stopped me. I put the car in drive. Who are you? I asked, checking the rearview mirror repeatedly, seeing nothing but my empty back seat. Mary, came the whisper. Mary Wilkins. I lived here in 1973. I died here in 1973. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Why are you in my car? Because you answered. Because you can help. Others have driven past. Ignored the request. I drove in silence for several minutes, mind racing. Finally, why Willow Street? That's where he buried me. Under the oak tree. He's still there, you know. Different body now, different name, same Evie. The car's electronics flickered. Dashboard lights blinking, radio turning on and off. The voice grew fainter. Hard to stay. Used all my strength to call your car. Find my bones, tell them it was Robert. Robert Taylor, my boyfriend. He killed the others too. Others? 7 of us, all buried on the property. He owns the house on Willow now. We were approaching the address, a well-maintained craftsman with manicured gardens. Lights glowed warmly from within. It looked nothing like a killer's den. I can't just go digging in someone's yard, I said. I need proof. A photograph appeared on the passenger seat, yellowed, creased. A young woman with feathered hair and a nervous smile, standing beside a bearded man outside the Victorian house where I'd received the pickup request. How did you... Tell the police Mary sent you. Tell them to look for the antique locket with my picture. He keeps it in his bedroom. Trophies. He keeps trophies from all of us. We arrived at the address. The back seat suddenly felt empty in a different way. Truly vacant now. Not occupied by something invisible. The next day, after hours of deliberation, I went to the police with the photograph and my story. They were skeptical until I mentioned the name Robert Taylor and the locket. One detective's expression changed. They'd been investigating a cold case, missing women from the 1970s. Robert Taylor had been a suspect, but was never charged. The current homeowner was Robert Keller, age 75. They found the bones of 8 women buried around an oak tree in the backyard. They found a collection of jewelry in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, including a tarnished locket containing a familiar face from the photograph. I don't drive nights anymore, but sometimes when I pass the old Victorian house, my rideshare app chimes with a request. I never accept. Some passengers are better left where they are. That concludes tonight's case. But the shadows don't sleep. I'm Dr. Haunted. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and your nightmares closer. You've entered the archives of the forgotten. I'm Dr. Haunted. Tonight I'll show you what was never meant to be seen. Just remember, once you know the truth, You can't unsee it. I've worked as a conductor on the Northeastern Rail Line for 15 years. Most days blend together, checking tickets, answering questions, managing the occasional difficult passenger. But what happened on train 217 last winter still haunts me. It was the last run of the night, the 11:45 p.m. from Lakeside to Millerton, a 40-mile stretch through dense forest and 3 mountain tunnels. In January, it's pitch black for the entire journey. That night, we had a nearly empty train, just 7 passengers scattered throughout 5 cars. Nothing unusual for a weeknight in the dead of winter. After departing Lakeside, I began my routine ticket check. In the 3rd car, I noticed a woman I hadn't seen board. She sat alone, facing away from me, wearing an outdated red coat with a matching hat, the kind you'd see in photographs from the 1950s. "Ticket, please," I said. She didn't respond. I stepped closer, repeating my request. Still nothing. I reached out to tap her shoulder, but before I could, she turned. Her face was wrong, pale, waxy, with eyes that seemed to reflect no light. But most disturbing was the deep gash across her throat, bloodless and gaping. "I don't have a ticket," she whispered, her voice like static. "I never got one. That's why it happened." I stepped back, nearly tripping over the seats behind me. When I looked again, she was gone. Shaken, I continued my rounds. At the next stop, I counted the passengers disembarking and boarding. The numbers didn't add up. We should have had 8 passengers, but I could only count 7. I mentioned this to Mike, the engineer, over the radio. "Train 217, he asked, his voice tense. "Check the manifest date." I did. January 17th, exactly 50 years ago today. "The Red Lady," Mike said quietly. "She appears every year on the anniversary," he explained. In 1974, a young woman in a red coat tried to board train 217 without a ticket. The conductor at the time, a man with a reputation for strictness, refused to let her on despite the blizzard conditions. She attempted to jump aboard as the train departed. She slipped, fell beneath the wheels and died instantly. "The worst part," Mike said, "is what the investigation found. She actually had a ticket. It had fallen into the lining of her coat. She died for nothing." I finished my rounds, deliberately avoiding the 3rd car. As we approached the 2nd tunnel, the lights flickered. Standard when switching to backup power. But when they came back on, every seat in my car was occupied by a woman in a red coat, all with the same bloodless gash across their throats, all staring at me. I blinked, and they vanished. All except one, now seated directly across from me. "Will you take my ticket now?" she asked, extending a blood-stained slip of paper from a gloved hand. The train lurched violently. The emergency brakes screamed. I was thrown against the wall, momentarily blacking out. When I came to, we were stopped inside the tunnel. The emergency lights cast a red glow throughout the car. The passengers were panicking. Mike's voice crackled over my radio. "Someone pulled the emergency brake," he said. "Someone in a red coat. Did you see who?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because standing at the front of the car was the woman, her finger pressed to her lips in a silencing gesture. The next day's papers reported that train 217 had stopped for 30 minutes due to a mechanical issue. What they didn't report was that every passenger claimed to have seen a woman in red walking through the cars during those 30 minutes, punching tickets that disappeared as soon as she moved on. I quit the following week. But every January 17th, I receive a letter containing a single train ticket. The destination is always listed as home. I burn them without fail. But I know someday she'll collect my fare. I don't sleep well anymore. Not since that night 6 months ago when I took the last train home from Westfield. I was working late, graphic design deadline for a major client, and missed my usual 7:30 p.m. train. The station attendant told me the final train departed at 11:55 p.m. "Just make sure you're in the first 4 cars," he said, not looking up from his newspaper. "The last 2 don't open at Millbrook." Millbrook was my stop, a small suburban station 20 miles from the city. At 11:50 p.m. I stood alone on the platform. The electronic board showed one remaining departure. 11:55 p.m, track 7 final destination. No other stops listed. Odd, but digital displays malfunction all the time. The train arrived exactly on time, sleek, modern, but strangely silent. No screeching brakes, no hissing doors. Just suddenly, there. I boarded the 4th car as advised. It was empty except for one other passenger, an elderly man in a conductor's uniform that looked decades out of date. He didn't acknowledge me. The doors closed. No announcement, no conductor checking tickets. The train moved smoothly into the night. After 10 minutes, I realized we weren't stopping at the usual stations. The windows showed only darkness, no lights from towns or crossings. I checked my phone, no signal, and the time was frozen at 11:55 p.m. I walked to the front of the car to find the conductor, but the elderly man was gone. The door to the 3rd car was locked. So was the door to the 5th car. Trapped, I returned to my seat. That's when I noticed the train was gaining speed. The darkness outside had transformed, now streaked with faint bluish lights, like stars seen through fog. A voice came over the PA system, "Final destination approaching. All passengers transfer at the terminal." The voice was distorted, inhuman. I tried the emergency call button. Nothing. The windows wouldn't open. Even the floor felt wrong, vibrating with an intensity that made my teeth ache. Suddenly, the brakes engaged. The train began slowing. Through the windows, I could now see a platform emerging from the darkness, ancient, crumbling, lit by flickering lamps that cast more shadows than light. The station sign read, "Terminus." As we stopped, I saw them, hundreds of people standing motionless on the platform, all facing the train. Their clothes spanned decades of fashion, from Victorian to modern. Their faces were uniformly grey, eyes black holes in pallid skin. The doors opened. The passengers began boarding the other cars, moving in perfect unison, never speaking. A new conductor appeared in my car, tall, skeletal, wearing a black uniform with a name tag that constantly shifted between illegible symbols. "Ticket," he demanded, voice like grinding metal. "I'm going to Millbrook," I managed to say. "This isn't my stop." "This is everyone's stop eventually," he replied. "Ticket." I fumbled for my monthly pass. As I handed it over, I noticed the date had changed. It now displayed a date 30 years in the future. The conductor punched the ticket and returned it. "Not your time yet, lucky you." He pulled an ancient pocket watch from his coat. "You have 30 seconds to disembark before we depart for the final destination." I ran. Behind me, I heard the new passengers filing into my car, their footsteps perfectly synchronized, their breathing a single collective sigh. I leapt onto the platform just as the doors closed. The train departed, accelerating into darkness until only a point of light remained. Then nothing. I collapsed, unconscious. Morning commuters found me on platform 7 at Westfield Station. According to the staff, no trains had run after 11:30 p.m. due to track maintenance. But my ticket was still in my hand, punched with a symbol like a stylized hourglass. And beneath it, in faded text, "Return journey pending." I take the bus now, but some nights I wake at exactly 11:55 p.m. to the sound of a distant train whistle, growing closer each time. The station attendant who advised me that night. He died 30 years ago. The Historical Society has a photograph of him in their archives, standing beside a train that derailed in 1954, killing all passengers aboard. All except one, who reportedly walked away from the wreckage, untouched. I've been an engineer with Central Railroad for 22 years. Most of my routes cross the Appalachian Mountains, including the infamous Black Ridge Tunnel, a 3-mile stretch carved through solid rock in 1923. The tunnel has a reputation among railroad workers. We all know the stories. Last October, I was assigned the overnight freight run through Black Ridge. My usual co-engineer called in sick, so they paired me with Marcus, a new hire I'd never worked with before. "First time through Black Ridge?" I asked as we prepared for departure. "First time on this route," he replied. "Heard some stories, though." I nodded. Everyone's heard the stories. How during construction, a cave-in trapped 27 workers. How the company, desperate to meet deadlines, sealed the tunnel with the men still inside, officially reporting them as missing, presumed dead. How their families never recovered the bodies. What most don't know is the company log I found in the archives last year, documenting radio transmissions from inside the sealed section for 6 days after the collapse. We departed on schedule at 10:30 p.m. The first 2 hours were routine. As we approached Black Ridge around 12:45 a.m., I briefed Marcus on the standard procedure. We kill the external lights, run on internals only. Radio silence through the tunnel. Don't stop for any reason. He looked confused. "Why?" "Company policy," I said. The truth was more complicated. Something about the tunnel's acoustics, the way sound and light behaved differently inside. How sometimes the radio picked up voices that couldn't possibly be there. We entered Black Ridge at 1:17 a.m. The darkness swallowed our train instantly, the powerful headlight barely penetrating 50 feet ahead. The tunnel walls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Halfway through, Marcus tensed beside me. "Did you hear that?" I'd heard it. A tapping sound coming from the roof of our cab, rhythmic, deliberate, like Morse code. "Ignore it," I said. "Probably just debris falling." Then came the voices over the radio, faint at first, then clearer. Multiple voices overlapping. "Still air down here. Can't dig through. They sealed it. They sealed us in." Marcus reached for the radio dial. I stopped him. "Don't respond. Don't acknowledge. Just keep moving." The tapping intensified. The train's electrical systems fluctuated, lights dimming, instruments flickering. The temperature dropped so rapidly our breath clouded the air. The radio voices grew more desperate. "We know you're there. Stop the train. Help us." Marcus was visibly shaken. "Shouldn't we call dispatch?" "Report this." "They know," I said grimly. "Everyone knows. Why do you think we run on radio silence?" Then it happened. Something I'd heard about but never experienced myself. The tunnel ahead appeared to stretch, elongating impossibly. Our speed indicator showed 45 miles per hour, but we seemed to be crawling. The exit, visible as a pinpoint of light, didn't get any closer. "We're slowing down," Marcus said. "No, we're not." I showed him the gauges, all normal. The radio erupted with a chorus of voices, dozens speaking simultaneously, begging, pleading. The tapping became pounding, reverberating throughout the cab. Then, silhouetted against our headlight, a figure appeared on the tracks ahead. A man in outdated work clothes, face covered in coal dust, one hand raised in a stopping gesture. I didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. The figure didn't move. Just before impact, Marcus yelled, "Stop!" But there was no impact. The figure dissipated like smoke as we passed through it. Then another appeared, and another. Dozens of them standing in our path, dissolving as we reached them. The exit finally appeared. We emerged into blessed moonlight, both of us shaking, neither speaking until we were miles away. Marcus quit the next day. I didn't blame him. 2 weeks later, they found his car abandoned near the tunnel's maintenance entrance. The security footage showed him entering the tunnel on foot at 1:17 a.m. He never came out, but sometimes when I make the Blackridge run, I hear his voice among the others on the radio. And the tapping now sounds like it's coming from inside the cab, not outside. The company says I have 5 more years until retirement, 5 more years of Blackridge. I don't think I'll make it that long. None of us do. I've been writing this account in short bursts whenever I can maintain a clear mind. It won't be long before they notice what I'm doing. They always notice, eventually. 2 months ago, I was returning home from a business trip. My flight was cancelled due to storms, so I booked a last-minute ticket on the overnight train from Chicago to Detroit. It was an older train, not the modern Amtrak sets I was used to, but functional enough. I boarded at 10:45 p.m, finding my assigned seat in the 4th carriage. The train was half empty, just scattered passengers, most already dozing off. I settled in, planning to catch up on work before sleeping. About an hour into the journey, I needed to use the restroom. The one in my carriage was out of order, so I headed toward the back of the train. As I passed through the 5th carriage, I noticed something odd. The decor was different, older. The seats were vintage plush rather than modern fabric, the lighting more yellow than white. I continued into the 6th carriage, the last one according to the attendant's announcement. This car was even more anachronistic, wooden paneling, brass fixtures like something from the 1940s. Most strangely, it was full of passengers, all dressed in period clothing. None looked up as I entered. They sat motionless, staring straight ahead or out the windows at the darkness. At the end of the carriage was a door marked 7 in faded brass numerals. This confused me. There were only supposed to be 6 carriages. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door. Carriage 7 was dimly lit by flickering lamps. The seats were ancient leather, cracked with age. The passengers here were even more outdated in appearance. Clothing from the early 1900s, skin pale and waxy under the weak light. One elderly woman looked up as I entered. Her eyes widened in recognition, though I'd never seen her before. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Not your time yet." Before I could respond, a conductor appeared beside me, tall, gaunt, in a black uniform that seemed to absorb what little light there was. "Ticket," he demanded. "I'm just looking for the restroom," I explained. "Ticket," he repeated, holding out a gloved hand. I showed him my valid ticket. He examined it, then looked at me with milky, cataract-covered eyes. "This is for the living train," he said. "You're in the wrong carriages." He gripped my arm, his hand ice-cold even through my jacket, and began leading me back toward carriage 6. As we walked, he spoke in a monotone. In 1923, the Chicago-Detroit overnight derailed near Battle Creek. The last 2 carriages separated and plunged into the river. 67 passengers drowned. The company recovered only the first 5 carriages. The last 2 were never found. We passed through carriage 6. The passengers now all turned to watch me, their eyes reflecting the dim light like animals in the dark. "Every night we run the same route," the conductor continued, "picking up those who belong with us. You don't belong, not yet." We reached the door to carriage 5. Before opening it, he released my arm and stepped back. "Don't return here," he warned. "Those who visit twice must stay." I stumbled back into carriage 5, which now appeared normal again. I returned to my seat, convinced I'd experienced some sort of exhaustion-induced hallucination. When we arrived in Detroit, I asked the station attendant about the train's history. He looked puzzled. "That line only has 5 carriages," he said. "Always has. I've taken the same train 3 times since then, trying to find carriages 6 and 7. They're never there. Until last week. I glimpsed carriage 6 through my window while walking alongside the train. Inside, all the passengers were staring out at me. Among them was my reflection, sitting still, staring back. Tonight, I'm taking the train again. I need to understand what's happening. But as I write this, I notice my skin looks paler, my reflection in the computer screen slightly transparent, and there's a train ticket on my desk I don't remember buying. The destination reads simply, "The end of the line." I hear the whistle blowing now. I think it's time to board. That concludes tonight's case. But the shadows don't sleep. I'm Dr. Haunted. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and your nightmares closer. You've entered the archives of the forgotten. I'm Dr. Haunted. Tonight I'll show you what was never meant to be seen. Just remember, once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. I've worked hospital security for 12 years. Night shift always. The pay's better, and I prefer the quiet. Most nights are routine, checking doors, escorting late-night visitors, responding to the occasional disturbance. St. Margaret's is an old hospital built in the 1930s with numerous renovations and additions over the decades. Officially, it has 12 floors, but there's a 13th floor, not listed on any directory, not accessible by the main elevators, and officially designated as mechanical storage. The thing is, there's nothing mechanical stored there. My third year on the job, I was training a new guard named Alicia. During our rounds, she asked about the service elevator that required a special key. "Where does it go?" she asked. "13th floor," I said. "Don't worry about it. We don't patrol there." Her face scrunched in confusion. This building only has 12 floors. That night, curiosity got the better of her. While I was on break, Alicia took my keys and went up alone. The cameras caught her entering the service elevator at 2:17 a.m. When I realized she was missing, I checked the footage and saw where she'd gone. I called my supervisor immediately. "She went to 13, he asked, voice tight with concern. "Alone? Jesus Christ." I raced to the service elevator, rode up and stepped into a corridor that shouldn't exist. The 13th floor was a perfect replica of a hospital wing. Patient rooms, nurses' station, even a small waiting area, but everything was decades outdated. 1950s equipment, ancient monitors, and empty, completely silent. "Alicia?" My voice echoed off the walls. I found her in the last room, standing motionless at the foot of a hospital bed. In the bed lay a patient, an elderly woman, skin grey, eyes open but clouded, unmoving. "She asked for her medicine," Alicia whispered without turning. "She's been waiting so long." I grabbed Alicia's arm. "There's nobody there. We need to leave. Now." But there was someone there. As I pulled Alicia toward the door, the figure in the bed turned its head. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, and emitted a sound like static mixed with thousands of whispered voices. The lights flickered. In the momentary darkness, I felt cold fingers brush my neck. We ran. As the elevator doors closed, I glimpsed figures in white uniforms emerging from the other rooms, dozens of them, moving in unison with jerky, broken motions. Alicia quit that night. The official report cited unauthorized access to restricted areas as the reason. 2 days later, she was admitted to St. Margaret's psychiatric ward after attempting to remove her own eyes. "I can still see them when I close them," she reportedly told the EMTs. My supervisor called me into his office the next morning. "The 13th floor doesn't exist," he said flatly. "It never has. We have certain patients who sometimes need to be elsewhere. Understand?" I understood. Now I do my rounds, check my doors, and never ever look at the service elevator. Sometimes, after particularly quiet nights, I'll find a nurse's cap from the 1950s sitting on my desk. And occasionally, the elevator will arrive in the lobby without being called, doors opening to reveal an empty car that smells of antiseptic and rot. My replacement starts training next week. I won't be showing him the service elevator key. Some floors are better left unvisited. I worked the overnight shift at KDRM, a small radio station in rural Montana. From midnight to 6 a.m. I was alone in the station, just me, the equipment, and whatever callers might phone in with requests. The station was housed in an old converted farmhouse miles from town. Most nights were quiet, maybe 3 or 4 callers throughout my shift. I'd play their songs, read weather updates, and fill airtime with pre-selected playlists. 3 months into the job, I began receiving calls from the same person each night at exactly 3:33 a.m. The voice was always distorted, like they were speaking through something mechanical. "Play track 17, the caller would request. But our system didn't organize music by track numbers. I explained this repeatedly. The caller would simply hang up. After 2 weeks of this, I mentioned it to my manager. "Track 17, she repeated, face suddenly pale. "Don't play it. Whatever you do." She wouldn't elaborate, just made me promise. So I kept refusing the caller night after night. Then came the power outage. Severe thunderstorms knocked out electricity across the county. The station's backup generator kicked in, but our computer system rebooted, revealing a different interface, older, more primitive, with tracks organized numerically. And there it was, track 17. No artist name, no title, just 17 in flickering green text. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the phone rang. "Play track 17, said the voice, somehow clearer tonight. "Who is this?" I demanded. "Why this specific track?" "Because I'm still there," the voice replied. 17 minutes, that's how long it took me to die. Play it, and I'll show you." I hung up, hands shaking. The phone immediately rang again. "The record's still there. It has to be played. I need someone to hear." Against every instinct, I pulled up track 17 on the screen. The timestamp showed it was exactly 17 minutes long. "What will I hear?" I asked. "The truth," the voice whispered. "About what the station owner did in 1972. I didn't play it. I sat frozen until dawn, the phone ringing continuously. As sunlight broke through the windows, the computer system reverted to its modern interface. Track 17 disappeared. My manager arrived looking haggard. "Did it call? Did you play it?" When I shook my head, she collapsed in relief. She finally told me the truth. In 1972, the station owner had murdered a young DJ who threatened to expose the owner's embezzlement scheme. He buried the body under the station floorboards. The victim had recorded evidence of his suspicions, 17 minutes of audio, but it was never found. The station changed ownership years later, the crime undiscovered. That night, I brought a crowbar to work. During a pre-recorded segment, I pried up the floorboards beneath my desk. I found a small box containing a reel-to-reel tape labeled 17 and human finger bones. The police recovered remains of the missing DJ. The former owner, now elderly, confessed when presented with evidence. Case closed. But the phone still rings at 3:33 a.m. The voice is clearer now, more grateful. "Someone finally heard," it says. "Someone finally knew what happened to me. I've submitted my resignation. My final shift is tonight. I don't know if the calls will follow me home, but I do know the night shift at KDRM will never truly be alone. Some voices don't stop when the broadcast ends." I've been a night shift nurse at Greenwood Medical Center for 7 years. We have a saying on the overnight shift: nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Usually it refers to the typical emergencies, drunken injuries, domestic violence, heart attacks that wake people from sleep. But last winter, it took on a new meaning. The night started normally. I had 5 patients, typical load for our floor. At 1:45 a.m., the charge nurse approached my station. "We're getting an admission," she said, handing me a chart. "Room 427. I frowned. 427? That room's being renovated? She looked confused, checked her papers. System shows it's available. Patients en route now. Elderly female, pneumonia. I called maintenance, but no one answered. Typical. I decided to check the room myself. Room 427 was at the end of the east wing, an older part of the hospital. As I approached, I noticed the hall lights dimming slightly. The renovation signs were gone. Room 427's door was closed, the digital chart display active, showing the name Agnes Winters. Inside, the room looked fully functional. Monitors ready, bed made, everything in place. No sign of recent construction. Maybe maintenance had finished early and failed to update the floor plan. I prepared the room for admission and returned to my station. At precisely 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. "Your admission for 427 has arrived," said the transport coordinator. I met the gurney at the elevator. An elderly woman lay motionless, oxygen mask obscuring most of her face. The transport team seemed hurried, barely waiting for my signature before disappearing back into the elevator. I wheeled Mrs. Winters to 427, transferred her to the bed, and connected her monitors. Her vitals were stable but weak. Pneumonia at her age, 94 according to her chart, was serious. "Just getting you settled, Mrs. Winters," I said, adjusting her oxygen. "Doctor will be in soon." Her eyes remained closed, but her hand suddenly gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Not again," she whispered. "They always bring me back to this room." "First time here?" I asked, checking her chart for previous admissions. "No," she said. "I died here, 1956. I froze. "Mrs. Winters?" Her eyes opened, cloudy, cataract white. "This room, always this room, where the mistake happened." My skin prickled. The monitor showed her heart rate declining rapidly. "I need to call a code," I said, reaching for the alarm. "No." Her grip tightened. "It won't matter. I'm not really here. None of us are." The lights flickered. When they stabilized, Mrs. Winters looked different. Younger somehow, her hospital gown now an old-fashioned patient dress. "What happened in 1956? I managed to ask. "Medication error. Wrong patient, wrong medication. 5 of us died before they realized. They covered it up. Every year on the anniversary, we return. We're admitted. We die again. Over and over." The monitor flatlined. I hit the code button, started compressions. No response. The code team never arrived. When I ran to the nurses' station, everyone was busy, unhearing as I shouted for help. It was like I was invisible. I returned to 427. The room was empty. No patient, no equipment. Just dust-covered tarps and construction materials. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the small brass plaque beside the door I hadn't noticed before. "This room closed permanently in memorial. February 17th, 1956. Today's date. I checked the computer. No record of Agnes Winters' admission existed. No assignment to room 427. But when I opened my locker at shift's end, I found a nurse's cap from the 1950s, with a note pinned to it. "Thank you for witnessing." 4 more to go. I quit the next day. But every February 17th, I receive a call from Greenwood Medical Centre's staffing office, asking if I can cover the night shift. I always refuse. The Oakmont Museum of Natural History is impressive by day. 4 floors of exhibits, research labs and storage facilities housing artifacts from around the world. By night, when I patrol its empty halls, it's a different place entirely. I took the night watchman position 6 months ago. The pay was decent, the job description straightforward. Hourly rounds, monitoring security cameras, reporting any disturbances. The previous watchman had left suddenly. No explanation given. "Don't go into the basement archives after midnight," my supervisor instructed during training. Those motion sensors are faulty, always triggering false alarms. We're getting them replaced next quarter. For 3 months, everything was routine. Then the dreams started. Vivid nightmares where I wandered the basement archives while something watched from the shadows. I'd wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. The basement motion alarms began triggering nightly at exactly 2:17 a.m. Protocol required investigating all alarms, but remembering my instructions, I simply reset them from the security office. After 2 weeks of this, curiosity overcame caution. I decided to check the basement myself. The archives were climate-controlled storage for artifacts not currently on display. Rows of metal shelving, sealed crates, specimens in preservation fluid. My flashlight swept the aisles as I moved deeper into the room. Nothing seemed disturbed, but the air felt thick, charged somehow. At the back wall, I discovered a door I hadn't noticed during my orientation tour. Heavy steel with an electronic keypad lock. No signage, no markings. The next day, I asked the curator about it casually. "Storage," she said dismissively. "Very old specimens, nothing interesting." But that night, checking the security camera footage from previous alarm triggers, I noticed something odd. At exactly 2:17 a.m. each night, the basement camera would pixelate for 3 seconds. When the image cleared, the unmarked door would be ajar, just slightly. By the time I'd arrived to investigate, it would be closed again. I requested the door code from my supervisor, claiming I needed to conduct a complete security review. "That area's off limits to security personnel," he said sharply. "Director's orders." That night, I brought a small pry bar on my rounds. When the alarm triggered at 2:17 a.m., I hurried downstairs. As expected, the unmarked door was closed. Using the pry bar, I managed to force it open. Beyond was a short corridor leading to another room. The walls were lined with wood instead of concrete. Much older construction than the rest of the building. The room itself was circular, with a single glass display case in the center. Inside the case was what appeared to be a mummified body, not wrapped like Egyptian mummies, but desiccated, skin stretched tight over bones. Not human, proportions all wrong, limbs too long, eye sockets too large. Most disturbing was the plaque. Unknown specimen, discovered 1872, Oakmont Mining Company, shaft number 7. Classification pending. A noise behind me, footsteps. I turned, expecting security or angry administrators. Instead, I saw the curator, dressed in clothing from another century. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice oddly distorted. "No one should see it until it's ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. Her face changed, skin tightening, eyes enlarging. "To wake up. It's been sleeping so long." I ran. Somehow found my way back to the security office. Reported nothing. The next night, the curator introduced me to my replacement. "You're being reassigned to day shift," she explained. "Better suited to your temperament." I noticed her hands, elongated fingers, skin too tight. In the locker room, my replacement smiled at me. His teeth seemed too numerous, his jaw unhinging slightly as he spoke. "Don't worry about the basement alarms anymore," he said. "I'll handle those personally." I quit that day. The dreams haven't stopped. Sometimes I wake to find soil from the museum grounds on my bedroom floor. And last week I received a museum newsletter announcing a new exhibit opening next month. The Sleeping Ones, Oakmont's Underground Discoveries. My name is listed as a special contributor. I've been driving long-haul trucks for 20 years, crossing America's highways in the dead of night when most people are safely tucked in bed. You hear stories on the CB radio, ghost riders, phantom hitchhikers, trucks that vanish in plain sight. I dismissed them as bored drivers spinning yarns to stay awake, until I found exit 55. It wasn't on my route map, but after 17 hours straight on a desolate stretch of Nevada highway, I needed fuel and coffee. when I saw the exit sign gleaming in my headlights. Last service is 100 miles. I took it. The truck stop appeared ordinary enough. Gas pumps, a brightly lit diner, a handful of rigs parked in the lot. The place was called Midnight Mile Rest Stop. Quaint name, I thought. Inside the diner, a few truckers hunched over coffee cups at the counter. An older waitress with a nameplate reading Ruby approached as I settled into a booth. "Coffee, hun?" she asked, already pouring. "Specials meatloaf tonight," I ordered, making small talk. "Don't remember seeing this place before," Ruby smiled. "We're only open certain hours, for certain folks." I should have noticed then how all the other drivers kept their faces down, how no one's food was actually being eaten, just pushed around plates. How the wall clock read 3:33, but the hands weren't moving. My meatloaf arrived, steaming. I took a bite, tasteless, like chewing paper. Ruby watched me intently. "Something wrong with your meal, hun?" "It's fine," I lied. She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Finish up then. Dawn's coming. You don't want to be here when the sun rises." The warning in her voice was unmistakable. I glanced around more carefully now. The other drivers, their clothes were dated. One wore a Texaco uniform I hadn't seen since the 1970s. Another's jacket advertised a trucking company that went bankrupt decades ago. When I looked back at my food, a small note had appeared beside my plate. "Run." I went to the restroom to gather my thoughts. No reflection appeared in the mirror. Instead, I saw the diner from above. Empty booths, no customers, Ruby standing motionless behind a dust-covered counter. When I returned to my booth, Ruby was waiting. "Do you know what happens to drivers who stay too long?" she asked softly. "They become part of our little family. We haven't had anyone new since 1997. Through the windows, I noticed the sky lightening, dawn approaching. "I should get going," I said, reaching for my wallet. Ruby's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Her skin felt papery, dry. "The bill's already been paid," she said. "It's always been paid." I bolted for the door. Outside, the lot was now filled with trucks. Dozens of them, models spanning decades. Some so old they belonged in museums. All covered in a fine layer of dust. My rig was where I'd left it, but now sandwiched between two ancient Peterbilts. As I climbed in, I noticed all the other trucks had drivers sitting motionless behind their wheels, staring straight ahead, hands gripping steering wheels, eyes glazed. I fired up my engine and peeled out, watching in my mirror as Ruby and the other customers stood in a perfect line outside the diner, watching me leave. Back on the highway, I radioed the incident to other drivers. Nobody had heard of Exit 55. When I mentioned Midnight Mile, an old-timer broke in. That place burned down in '67, killed everyone inside. Some kind of cult thing. They say the victims lure in new blood every decade or so. I've changed my routes since then. I don't drive Nevada at night anymore. And I always check my maps carefully for exits that shouldn't exist. Sometimes my CB radio crackles with Ruby's voice in the darkest hours of night. "Specials meatloaf tonight, hun. We're saving you a seat." That concludes tonight's case. But the shadows don't sleep. I'm Dr. Haunted. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and your nightmares closer. You've entered the archives of the forgotten. I'm Dr. Haunted. Tonight, I'll show you what was never meant to be heard. Just remember, once you know the truth, you can't unhear it. I never wanted to tell this story. For 3 years, I've kept it locked away, hoping the memories would fade. But the nightmares won't stop. And maybe sharing what happened that night at the edge of Ouagadougou will finally give me peace. My name is Laurent. I was a junior foreign correspondent stationed in Burkina Faso when Captain Ibrahim Traoré first rose to power. While most international journalists clustered around official press conferences and government buildings, I prided myself on getting the real stories from ordinary citizens. "You should stick to the designated areas," my colleague Michel warned me one evening as I prepared to visit the outskirts of Ouagadougou. "There are checkpoints everywhere since the coup, and the military doesn't like foreigners wandering around asking questions." I waved him off with the careless confidence of someone who'd never faced real danger. The people on the margins always have the truest stories. Besides, my local contact says this neighborhood has fascinating perspectives on the new regime. My contact was a university student named Adama who moonlighted as a translator. We'd worked together on several articles and I trusted him. He picked me up on his motorbike just after sunset, the air still scorching from the day's heat. "There's a meeting tonight," he explained as we weaved through traffic. "Former neighborhood officials gathering in secret. They're willing to talk about what happened during the transition of power." The neighborhood was a maze of narrow, unpaved streets lined with concrete buildings, most with corrugated metal roofs. We parked the motorbike and continued on foot, the only illumination coming from occasional windows and doorways where kerosene lamps or candles burned. "It's just up ahead," Adama whispered, pointing to a single-story building set back from the road. No lights were visible from outside. We approached cautiously. Adama knocked. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more. The door opened just enough for us to slip inside. The room was dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. 6 men sat around a wooden table, their faces partially hidden in shadow. They looked up as we entered, expressions guarded. The eldest, a man with deep lines etched into his face, gestured for us to sit. "You are the journalist? The one who wants to know about the night patrol?" I nodded, taking out my recorder. "If you're comfortable speaking about it." The men exchanged glances. "We will tell you," the elder said. "But no recordings, no names." I put the recorder away and took out my notebook instead. For the next hour, they told me about the weeks following Captain Traoré's rise to power, about how military patrols would sweep through neighborhoods at night, taking people who had connections to the previous government or who had been critical of the coup. "But the 3rd week," the elder continued, his voice dropping, "that's when the night patrol changed. According to their account, the regular patrols were replaced by a special unit that locals began calling les fantômes, the ghosts. They moved differently, silently, and always arrived precisely at midnight. They knew exactly who they wanted and where to find them," one man said, "as if they could see through walls or read minds." "People said it was the captain himself leading these patrols," another added, "that he had powers no ordinary man possessed." I tried to keep my skepticism from showing. "What kind of powers?" The elder leaned forward. "They say he can walk through walls, that bullets pass through him without leaving a mark, that he can look into your eyes and know every disloyal thought you've ever had." I jotted down these superstitions, valuable context for the fear surrounding the new regime. "That's when the elder's son disappeared," one of the younger men said, "taken by the midnight patrol." The elder nodded slowly. "My son Pascal spoke against the coup at the university. Just words, nothing more. The regular soldiers had already questioned and released him, but then Les Fantômes came." "Did you report it?" I asked. A bitter laugh circled the room. "Report to who?" the elder asked. "The same military that took him?" The meeting was interrupted by a commotion outside. Vehicle engines shouted commands. Everyone froze. "Military patrol," Adama whispered. "We need to leave." Now. There was a back door leading to an alley. We slipped out just as pounding began at the front entrance. Adama guided me through a series of narrow passages between buildings, moving with the confidence of someone familiar with escape routes. "We need to get back to the motorbike," he said urgently. We reached the street where we'd parked, but the bike was gone. "They must have found it," Adama muttered. "We'll have to go on foot." The neighborhood had transformed. Streets that had been quiet were now filled with shadows moving between buildings. In the distance, flashlight beams swept methodically down alleys. "This way." Adama pulled me toward a drainage ditch that ran behind a row of houses. We crouched in the shallow trench, moving as quietly as possible. The night had grown strangely cold. My breath formed visible clouds in front of my face, despite the season. "Something's wrong," Adama whispered. "It's never this cold here, even in winter." A heavy silence fell over the neighborhood. Even the dogs had stopped barking. The only sound was my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then I heard it, footsteps approaching along the ditch, but with an odd rhythm. They seemed to fall too far apart, as if whoever walked took impossibly long strides. Adama grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. His eyes were wide with terror. "Don't move," he breathed. "Don't even blink." The footsteps stopped directly above us. I looked up and saw a tall figure silhouetted against the night sky. He wore military fatigues and a red beret, his face obscured by shadow except for his eyes, which seemed to glow with a faint red light of their own. He looked directly down at our hiding spot. I was certain we'd been discovered, but after a moment he turned his head as if listening to something beyond human hearing. Then he did something impossible. He stepped forward, not around the ditch, but onto the air above it, crossing it in a single stride before continuing down the alley. Adama's grip on my arm relaxed slightly. "Captain Traoré," he whispered, so quietly I barely heard him. "That's ridiculous," I whispered back. "A captain wouldn't be leading a routine patrol, and people can't walk on air." Adama didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the spot where the figure had vanished. We waited 10 more minutes before continuing our escape. The neighborhood had grown quiet again, the search apparently moving to another area. We finally reached a main road where Adama flagged down a taxi. Back at my hotel, I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. The figure must have stepped on something crossing the ditch, a plank or debris I hadn't noticed in the darkness. The glowing eyes were just a trick of light reflected from a distant street lamp. I filed my story the